Colonel Robin Olds passed over Phuc Yen Airfield for the second time and saw nothing. It was 3 in the afternoon, January 2nd, 1967. The clouds were solid beneath him, the sky above was empty, and somewhere on that runway sat the MiG-21s that had been shredding American strike formations for 6 straight months. Every detail of his flight had been constructed to deceive. The route was an F-105 Thunder Chief bombing route. The altitude matched, the speed matched. The QRC-160 electronic countermeasure pods, bolted under his wings, broadcast the exact radar signature that North Vietnamese ground controllers had learned to associate with bomb-laden thuds. Olds was not carrying a single bomb. His 4 F-4C Phantoms carried nothing but Sparrow and Sidewinder missiles, and a bet that the enemy's own pattern recognition could be turned into a killing ground. The fuel gauges were falling. If the MiGs did not come up in the next few minutes, the most elaborate aerial deception of the Vietnam War would end without a shot fired. Before we continue, I need to ask a small favor. Cold War Impact is a small Cold War and military history channel, and recently our reach and views have dropped significantly. If you enjoy well-researched history videos like this one, please consider subscribing, leaving a comment, and sharing the video. Every interaction helps the channel reach new viewers and allows me to keep making these deep dive history documentaries. Now back to Vietnam. Throughout 1966, MiG-21 fighters had made the skies over North Vietnam into a gauntlet for American strike aircraft. The Vietnamese People's Air Force 921st Fighter Regiment, flying Soviet-built interceptors under tight ground-controlled intercept radar, had perfected a devastatingly simple tactic against formations of F-105 Thunder Chiefs. Approach low, beneath American radar coverage. Climb behind the strike formation at supersonic speed. Fire a K-13 heat-seeking missile from the rear quarter. Dive away before the escorts could react. One pass, then gone. Even when the missiles missed, the result was nearly as damaging. The moment a Thunder Chief pilot spotted a MiG on his tail, he had to jettison his bombs to maneuver. The mission was dead before the target was reached. The weapon that finally broke the MiG-21's dominance was not a new aircraft, a better missile, or a bombing raid on an enemy airfield. It was a LIE, told with radio frequencies, flight profiles, and electronic countermeasure pods. But to understand how that lie worked, you need to see what December of 1966 looked like from the cockpit of an F-105. In that single month, MiG-21 fighters from the 921st Fighter Regiment shot down 14 F-105 Thunder Chiefs without losing a single aircraft. More than 1/5 of all American strike sorties jettisoned their bombs before reaching their targets. The Thunder Chief was a supersonic fighter bomber designed to deliver nuclear weapons at low altitude. Over North Vietnam, it was being used as a conventional bomber, flying predictable formations along predictable corridors day after day. The North Vietnamese had learned to read every signature. Their ground controllers could distinguish an F-105 formation from an F-4 escort flight by radar return, speed, altitude, and radio traffic. They sent the MiGs after the bombers and ignored the fighters. The obvious solution was to destroy the MiGs on the ground. Phuc Yen Airfield, northwest of Hanoi, was the primary base for the 921st Fighter Regiment. American pilots could see the MiG-21s parked on the tarmac during their missions. They were forbidden to touch them. The Johnson administration had placed Phuc Yen and every other MiG base inside restricted zones, fearing that an attack might kill Soviet or Chinese advisors and escalate the war beyond Vietnam. Phuc Yen would not be struck until October of 1967. Until then, the MiGs launched, attacked, landed, rearmed, and launched again while American crews watched and followed orders. The 921st Fighter Regiment's confidence was not arrogance. It was arithmetic. Their MiG-21s were small, agile, and capable of exceeding Mach 2. Their Soviet advisors had built an intercept system around disciplined, single-pass attacks and immediate disengagement. The American F-4 Phantom, tasked with escorting the strike packages, was a powerful aircraft with beyond visual range Sparrow missiles and a capable radar. But the rules of engagement required visual identification before firing, which erased the Sparrow's range advantage entirely. The early F-4C carried no internal cannon. If the missiles missed, the pilot had nothing left. And in December of 1966, a revision to the rules of engagement pulled the F-4 escorts back to the edge of the surface-to-air missile envelope, widening the gap between the escorts and the bombers they were supposed to protect. The MiGs had a larger window to strike, and they filled it. The Americans could not bomb the airfields. Their escorts could not reliably intercept the MiGs in the air. Every conventional answer had been tried, and all of them had failed. What nobody had recognized yet was that the solution was not a better weapon. The F-4 could already kill a MiG-21. The problem was that the MiG-21 chose when to fight, and it only came up when it saw Thunder Chiefs. Robin Olds had arrived at Ubon Royal Thai Air Force Base on September 30th, 1966, to take command of the 8th Tactical Fighter Wing. He was 44 years old, and he had been fighting this kind of bureaucratic war for 2 decades. In World War II, he had flown P-38 Lightnings and P-51 Mustangs with the 479th Fighter Group in Europe, earning 12 confirmed aerial victories and becoming a double ace. He had spent the years after the war arguing that the Air Force was neglecting air combat training in favor of nuclear delivery doctrine, and nobody had listened. Now he was watching his pilots fly into a tactical problem that Washington's restrictions had made unsolvable by conventional means. 5 days after he took command, the 8th Wing lost an F-4C to a MiG-21's air-to-air missile. Olds did not file a complaint. He started planning a trap. In early December, Olds and his wing tactics officer, Captain John B. Stone, mapped the enemy's decision cycle. North Vietnamese ground controllers were identifying F-105 strike packages by their electronic signatures, their refueling tracks, their ingress routes, and their radio communications. Every one of those signatures could be duplicated. If F-4 Phantoms flew the exact Thunder Chief routes at Thunder Chief speeds, using the same call signs and radio procedures, and carrying the QRC-160 electronic countermeasure pods normally reserved for F-105s, the North Vietnamese radar operators would see exactly what they expected. They would scramble their MiG-21s to intercept a formation of heavy, bomb-laden Thunder Chiefs. What they would find instead were Phantoms stripped clean, loaded with air-to-air missiles, and crewed by pilots who had been waiting for this fight since September. Olds presented the plan to 7th Air Force Commander Lieutenant General William Momier on December the 22nd. Momier approved it and gave it the code name Bolo, after the Filipino machete that does not look like a weapon until the opponent is too close to escape. The mission was set for January the 1st, 1967. Weather pushed it to January 2nd. The West Force, F-4Cs from the 8th Tactical Fighter Wing, launched from Ubon and entered North Vietnamese airspace from Laos. A matching East Force from the 366th Tactical Fighter Wing at Da Nang was supposed to seal the MiG bases from behind, coming in from the Gulf of Tonkin. The East Force never made it through the weather. 2 West Force flights aborted with mechanical problems. The last 4 flights arrived after everything was already over. Of roughly 56 F-4Cs assigned to the operation, only about 12 entered the fight. 3 flights. Olds Flight, led by Colonel Olds himself. Ford Flight, led by Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Chappie James Jr. Rambler Flight, led by Captain John Stone, the man who had designed the deception. Olds passed over Phuc Yen twice. The MiGs stayed on the ground. North Vietnamese controllers had delayed the scramble by roughly 15 minutes because of the cloud cover. Fuel was becoming a problem. Then, just after 3 in the afternoon, the MiG-21s began climbing through the clouds. They expected Thunder Chiefs heavy with bombs. They found Phantoms, clean and armed. The engagement lasted 12 minutes. First Lieutenant Ralph Wetterhahn and First Lieutenant Jerry Sharp, flying Olds 02, fired a Sparrow and destroyed the first MiG-21. Captain Walter Radiker and First Lieutenant James Murray, Olds 04 killed a second with a Sidewinder. Colonel Olds himself, with First Lieutenant Charles Clifton in the back seat, executed a rolling maneuver to get behind a MiG-21 and fired 2 Sidewinders. One tore the right wing off the aircraft. Captain Everett Raspberry and First Lieutenant Robert Weston, Ford 02, downed a 4th. Captain Stone, flying Rambler 01, with First Lieutenant Clifton Dunnigan, destroyed a 5th with a Sparrow. Major Philip Combes in Rambler 04 and First Lieutenant Lawrence Glynn in Rambler 02 each killed a MiG-21 with Sparrow missiles. 7. MiG-21s destroyed. 0 American losses. 12 minutes. North Vietnamese records acknowledged the loss of 5 MiG-21s that day, with all 5 pilots ejecting safely. American records confirmed 7 kills. Both sides agreed on the outcome. The 921st Fighter Regiment's operational MiG-21 force had been cut roughly in half in a single afternoon. 4 days later, on January the 6th, Phantom crews repeated the concept by mimicking an RF-4C reconnaissance mission and shot down 2 more MiG-21s. 9 confirmed kills in 5 days. The Vietnamese People's Air Force pulled its MiG-21s from intercept operations entirely. American strike formations would not encounter another MiG-21 until late April of 1967, nearly 4 months later. Soviet advisors in Hanoi launched an immediate review of tactics, training, and the command decisions that had sent their pilots into the trap. Before Olds arrived at Ubon in September of 1966, the Air Force's air-to-air kill ratio over North Vietnam stood at roughly 2.6 to 1. By the end of January 1967, it had climbed to approximately 15 to 1. Between January and July of that year, American fighters downed 29 MiGs while losing just 2 aircraft in air-to-air combat. Robin Olds flew his last combat mission on September 23, 1967. He finished his tour with 4 confirmed MiG kills in Vietnam, 2 MiG-21s and 2 MiG-17s, giving him 16 career aerial victories across 2 wars. He later admitted he had deliberately avoided shooting down a 5th MiG because he learned that becoming an ace would get him pulled from combat and sent home as a publicity asset by the Secretary of the Air Force. He chose to keep flying and leading his wing instead. During his tour, Olds had grown a thick handlebar mustache in open defiance of Air Force grooming regulations. His pilots copied it as a morale symbol. Air Force Chief of Staff General John McConnell eventually ordered him to shave it. The gesture outlived the regulation. Every March, airmen around the world grow mustaches in what the service informally calls Mustache March, a tradition that traces directly back to Ubon. Olds was promoted to Brigadier General and served as Commandant of Cadets at the Air Force Academy, where the cadets greeted him on his first day wearing fake mustaches. He retired in 1973. His daughter Christina Olds and author Ed Rasimus completed his autobiography, Fighter Pilot, 3 years after his death. He died on June 14, 2007, at the age of 84. Operation Bolo did not fix the systemic failures that made the air war over Vietnam so costly. The missiles still malfunctioned at rates that would have been unacceptable in any previous conflict. The rules of engagement still stripped pilots of tactical flexibility. Training still prioritized nuclear delivery over dogfighting. Those failures eventually produced the Navy's Fighter Weapons School, known as Top Gun, in 1969, and the Air Force's Red Flag Aggressor program in the years that followed. Robin Olds had been advocating for exactly that kind of realistic combat training since 1946. It took a war to prove him right. What Bolo demonstrated was something the training programs alone could not teach. The most dangerous weapon in an air war is not the fastest jet or the longest range missile. It is the ability to make the enemy see what you want him to see and act on what he believes instead of what is true. Robin Olds understood that the dominance of the MiG-21 had been built entirely on the predictability of American operations. He fed that predictability back to the enemy, loaded with Sparrows and Sidewinders instead of bombs, and let the trap close itself. The 12 minutes that followed did not just change the air war over North Vietnam. They wrote the opening page of every deception doctrine the United States Air Force has used since.